Judy? Do you want lunch? Oh, it depends. Yeah, what is it? There's some fruit, there's, I know that's salads and,
There's like chicken and vegetables, chicken tenders, mac and cheese, rice, pita.
okay, a little bit after, but thank you. Help yourself. There's plenty.
Really, you don't mind looking at it?
It doesn't bother me.
It doesn't?
No.
Hello.
I'm Sherry Carroll. I'm working more with or training more with the Keller Williams in Burlington. But since Karen was training you today, I'm here today.
I have a following, Judy. Yeah.
I was actually here last month for her.
Are you work? I
Yeah.
got you.
Okay.
Cause I think I missed that one. Or maybe,
Oh.
I don't know, but anyway, I didn't mean.
It's fine.
I'm Judy.
Judy. Okay, Judy. What's your last name?
Like that.
Weinstock.
Uh-huh.
Okay, I'm Sherry Harrell.
Nice to meet you. Oh,
Well, great.
Yeah, that's what I was saying, help yourself. Let's see.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you.
They're a little more open-minded, but the People's Pharmacy had a show this last weekend about how you can't say that vegetarianism is necessarily better than a carnivore diet.
Yes, so you're trying some chicken.
Maybe we'll see. If I can.
All right, well, we do have a couple on Zoom, so, you guys go ahead. I'm gonna go ahead and get started to make sure we get through all of this and also answer any questions that you might have. So today we are talking about the offer to purchase. In front of you, you have a, version that is highlighted, which actually shows the changes that were made from the previous version. I'd like to not only just talk about the changes, but also talk about a couple of common mistakes that I see. Number one is your seller. So make sure that the seller is the actual name of the person or entity that owns the property, that is transferring the property. So this could be, and also don't use nicknames. So if their name is James Smith, don't put Jimmy. Make sure that you're using their correct full name, full legal name. Also, if it is in a trust, then the trust is the name of the seller. Dead people can't sell property. So it is, the trust is who is transferring the property. If it's an entity owned property, it would be the name of the entity that's transferring. So for example, if my husband were the seller, it would be SM Ward Construction Inc. as the seller, because that's whose name the deed is in. So that's who's transferring the property. Now, later on, Scott, as a human, is going to sign on behalf of the entity, but the entity is actually who the seller is. And same thing with buyer. Make sure that you are putting the buyer's full and correct name. And I had a file I reviewed last week. It was our listing. and the buyer agent didn't even know what their buyer's name was. I mean, there was a strike through correcting the name of the buyer. So, you know, that's a conversation to have when you're showing property or you're doing a buyer agency agreement. This is also a great opportunity to, hey, send me a picture of your driver's license. To make sure, especially because this was a challenging, the spelling was challenging, let me tell you that. So, that's where, okay, what's on their driver's license, and that's where you're gonna put exactly what's on their driver's license. Particularly, you know, we also see it with, with a lot of Hispanic people. They may have multiple names, and their wife's name might be multiple names different from, they don't necessarily carry the same last name. So,
So if a husband bought the property before he got married,
yes,
now he's married and they're selling it. Both of their names go on the listing agreement? I
Yes.
know it has to go on the deed,
yes.
but on the listing agreement as well.
Yeah, so legally, it doesn't have to go on the listing agreement. We highly recommend that all parties go ahead and sign all documents throughout, that they would have to sign the offer to purchase, of course, throughout the transaction, just so that lets us know that they know that they're selling the property and we're not getting to the closing table and it's like, I'm not signing that deed.
Right.
So legally, it doesn't have to be on the listing agreement.
Okay.
However, we do, when there's two sellers or multiple sellers, we do ask.
Okay.
That, from a proactive standpoint, that they're on all,
On the listing paper.
Yes.
Thank you.
yes. Okay, this section, section C, fill out as much of this as possible. This helps the attorney. This also ensures that the buyer is getting the property that they are intending to get. All of this information is provided on the tax card. So it's a requirement that the tax card is a required document in your compliance. So you're pulling the tax card anyway. Put as much information. There may not always be a lot or a unit or a block or a section. It might not be in a subdivision or a condominium. So those would be blank. There may not be a plat book or slide, but there is always an address, a city, a zip, a county, a PIN, and a deed book and page. Usually there's an other description on there as well. Make sure you include all of that. And then the property will or will not include a manufactured or mobile home. Property will or will not include an off-site and or separate septic lot, boat slip, garage, parking space, or storage unit. Typically, although I know Judy had a separate garage on a recent transaction. Typically, where we're going to run into this is off-site septics. And so if either one of these boxes are checked, then you will need to use a additional provisions addendum to address those two things. And then any additional parcels. That one's a little tricky. So typically, if there's a question about this, about additional parcels, call me and let's talk through the situation to see if that is the proper box to check. One of the things that I love about this new contract is that just about all of the information, with the exception of a home warranty, is right here on the first page. So you're not, flipping through to page 9 to see, oh, are there seller paid closing costs? All of your, material fact information is right here. So purchase price, due diligence. We do not handle cash. So due diligence either needs to be in a personal check, preferably official bank check, or some sort of a electronic transfer or wire transfer. Electronic transfer can be Zelle, Venmo, any of those are acceptable, so long as the buyer and the seller are in agreement to it. Initial earnest money, again, so due diligence is due at the time of acceptance. Initial earnest money is due within 5 days of acceptance. And Sherry was just asking that question. We do not have a trust account, so earnest monies are held in escrow with typically the closing attorney or an attorney. We'll get to that in a little bit. And then additional earnest money, same thing. Understand additional earnest money is time is of the essence. Typically, we're going to see additional earnest money being paid when due diligence ends. So at the end of due diligence, then there is additional, so your due diligence date and your additional earnest money date are typically going to somewhat coincide.
Shouldn't that be 1 day after?
1 day after, yeah. If it is by assumption or by seller financing, we need to have an attorney involved. We do have a standard seller financing addendum. However, typically seller financing is not as simple as that form is. So anytime there's an assumption or seller financing, we need to get an attorney involved in drafting that up. Like our seller financing addendum does not have a amortization schedule with it. And then, so all of these minus any of these is the amount of due at closing. Seller concessions, this is, again, is the seller contributing. It can be a dollar amount or it can be a percentage amount. From the buy side, make sure that you are in communication with the lender before you put an amount in here. Because if it exceeds the allowable amount by the lender, then essentially your buyer has lost out on that money. So in other words, if you put $10,000 in there, but the lender only allows $8,000, that's $2,000 that your buyer didn't get the benefit of. So just make sure to be in touch with the lender on that one. And then your due diligence period. Check one, either the period beginning on the effective date and extending through 5 p.m. You would insert a date only, not NA. So even if the buyer is waiving inspections, then we would still, so you would put the date of the offer. Meaning at the end of that day, it's over. Or period extending for how many days, again, insert a number, and again, that would be 1. And both of those are time is of the essence. And then you've got your settlement date, and we're going to talk a little bit about settlement versus closing. This talks about the earnest money deposit. it's credited to the buyer at closing in case of a dispute between the seller and the buyer. Over the earnest, how the earnest money is to be distributed, then it typically has to go to the clerk of court to decide how that is going to be distributed. And then escrow agent. So here, if you don't have any earnest money, you can put TBD or no EM, buyer, closing attorney, whoever it is. However, if there is earnest money, you have to identify who that money is going to. So if there's earnest money, you can't put TBD. We have to identify where that money is going to. If for any reason that escrow agent changes, we have a form where we can change who the escrow agent is. If just a reminder, if there is earnest money, you have to name where those monies are going to.
If you don't know it at time of offer,
Find
leave
out.
it blank.
No,
No?
yeah, you need to put something in there. So, I mean, you know, potentially you've already had that conversation of, you know, this is typically who I use. And, you know, like if you put, you know, if you put Kendall Page in there and then they end up, no, we want to use Bagwell Holt, whatever the case may be, we have a form where you can change that. Yeah.
You don't want to see a blank initially that you
Correct.
get added to later.
Correct, yeah, because you can't add it later because it's already fully executed. Yes. So the effective date is the last one of buyer and seller has signed or initialed for any final counter offer. And then once it is communicated. So all parties have signed. I send Judy a text and say, contract's been fully executed. That becomes the effective date. Even though it may be, you know, it might be 10 o'clock at night and Judy and I both are in the bed and it might be the next morning before I'm able to actually send her the contract. But once I've communicated it, that becomes the effective date. And then due diligence, obviously, this is the buyer's opportunity to do any and all inspections that they would like to do on the property at their expense. And then the due diligence fee. So making sure you're having a conversation and setting the expectation at the beginning that due diligence fee is non-refundable. You get it back when you go to closing. Maybe a rare occasion that there is a seller breach. If for some reason there is a seller breach through the through the title search and the title work and all that, it's discovered that they can't transfer the property with clear title, that would be a seller breach out of their control, probably. Still, it's a seller breach, and then the buyer would be due the due diligence money back. Otherwise, when they go to closing. Settlement. So two different things. We've got settlement and we've got closing. So settlement is when we all meet at the attorney's office around the table and have a settlement party. This is where everything is signed, notarized, the whole 9 yards. Closing is the actual, it's been recorded. So it's the actual recording of the deed. And so we have our settlement party and then the attorney records the deed. And then the attorney calls you and says, you can come pick up your check. So now we have closed. So just remembering the difference, because settlement, when we're having our settlement party sitting at the table, the buyer does not yet own the property. Therefore, the buyer does not get access to the property. Buyer is not given keys. And a lot of times buyers think, oh, I came to my settlement party and I signed everything and I want to walk out the door with my keys in my hand. Well, no, because a couple of things have to happen. Not only does the deed have to be recorded, it has to be fully funded. They have to get final wire from the lender, and then they have to wire out all of the, like any mortgage payoff that the seller may have, and all of those things have to happen before that actually, before the property actually becomes the buyer's. So you don't want to give them keys at the settlement table, because what happens if something happens with the funding and the funding doesn't come in? Funding doesn't come in, attorney can't record. But now the buyer has the keys and they've got their moving truck and they're moving in, and the seller still owns the property. And then what happens if a tree falls on the house that night? Or there's a lightning storm and it gets struck by lightning, catches on fire and burns down? Who's responsible? It's still the seller's house, but it's got all the buyer's stuff in it. So it's a liability for both of them. So just making sure we are not releasing keys until we have gotten that nice phone call or email from the attorney's office that says we're recorded. Couple of different ways that you can handle that. Some attorneys will, hey Al, come on in, you can grab something to eat, and yeah, no worries. We're kind of spread out, so you can join me up here on the front row. Yeah. So some attorneys will hold the keys for you. Some have just been like, that's too much of a headache, we don't want to do it anymore. So it just depends on the attorney. And again, we have to trust the other agent. We also have to know the other agent's not always going to do the right thing. If you have a great relationship with the agent and you know them very well, then yes, you can leave them and say, once it's recorded, you can release the keys. Another thought on that, which is one that I used to always do, is I would go by. So I always did a walkthrough, just like the buyers do a walkthrough prior to closing, just to make sure that, okay, everything's still here. Everything, looks good. The seller didn't take something that they weren't supposed to take, and that sort of thing. And then I would change the lockbox code. And so that way, I could say, once it's recorded, I'll call you and give you or text you the lockbox code. So then their buyer can access the property. The part in red, just a reminder that we are, North Carolina is an attorney closing state. It must be an attorney that does the closing. Fixed
Yeah. Oh,
question? Robbie, did you have a question?
no, ma'am.
Okay, sorry. Thought I heard you. Fixtures and exclusions. The party should not assume that an item will or will not be included in the sale based on a statement or advertisement outside of this contract. So just because it says in MLS that the refrigerator and the washer and the dryer convey, we don't put it on the contract, then they don't convey. Because sometimes the buyer may not want that old washing machine or dryer or that old refrigerator, because they're bringing all of their new stuff with them. In which case it would be the responsibility of the seller to have those removed when they vacate the property. Fixtures that are included. Here's a list of most of the things, and this now also includes any, if it's a traditional version or a smart version. So if it's a If it's a Ring doorbell, that's a smart version, it remains. Unless excluded. So all of these things, if you think about these things, these are things that are permanent. They are put in the ground or they are affixed with a screw. They're intended to remain. Like your garage door openers, they remain because the garage door is a fixture in the property. Also addresses anything with swimming pools, television brackets. The TV doesn't have to remain, but the bracket that's affixed with a screw does remain unless requested by that the seller remove them. One thing that all bathroom wall mirrors. So whether it's hanging by a nail or it's affixed, glued, or whatever the case may be, they remain. Unpairing and deleting data from devices, just making sure that the seller is aware that they need to unpair any devices from anything from smart hubs to vehicles, to all of those need to be unpaired. And then this is where items leased are not owned. This would be things such as satellite dishes. This would be maybe an alarm system that was installed that is not owned. It's on a leased basis. Any appliances. This could also mean sometimes HVAC companies will install an HVAC and then they do a payment program. That all will have to be paid off at closing. This would also include, first of all, my recommendation, do not let your buyer buy a house with solar panels on it. However, if they insist, this would also include solar panels there. It does not include, this section does not include any fuel tanks. We will address fuel tanks later in the offer to purchase. So fuel tanks so you wouldn't put a fuel tank here because they're addressed separately later on. And then E is any other items that do not convey. So this would be grandma chandelier, whatever the other any other pieces that would not convey. Again, my recommendation on that is that if they don't convey, have the seller remove them ahead of time, because sure as the day, just like you love grandma chandelier, that buyer is gonna love grandma chandelier and want grandma chandelier. So anything that doesn't convey like that, go ahead and remove it and replace it with a like kind item for the price of the property. Not the $49 twig from Lowe's.
Can I ask you about mirrors for a second?
Sure.
So I have a client who has like a giant antique mirror
Mhm.
that sits on the floor.
Mhm.
That would convey, or
No.
only if it's actually attached?
Yes.
Even by a
Yes.
nail?
Yes, no, that's correct. I have about an 8-foot that is leaned up.
Uh-huh.
Same thing. It's just leaned up against the wall. No, that's,
It's weird to me because pictures and photographs don't convey, and they're hanging on the same nail that mirror might be, but you know what I mean? The same kind of nail. Little mirrors, little antique mirrors, like I have antique mirrors around the house.
yes, yeah.
Anyway.
So now we're gonna identify any personal property that does convey. What we just went over are fixtures. not considered personal property. So this would be your washer, your dryer, your refrigerator, a countertop microwave, the patio set outside. Keep these as low value items. Like if we start getting into a zero turn lawnmower, we probably want to put those on a separate bill of sale. Doesn't mean that any money has to, has to trade hands. Just on a, this may be a red flag for the lender. So the lender may be saying, wait, hold on, you're getting a $5,000 lawnmower included in this. So essentially now the bank is loaning on a $5,000 lawnmower. And the lender may not approve that. So just try to keep them as not these high priced items. Although, refrigerators and washers and dryers can be quite pricey as well. So due diligence process. Buyers strongly encouraged to conduct due diligence during the due diligence period. Now, it does not mean that you can't have an inspection after the due diligence period ends. That right doesn't go away just because the due diligence period has ended, yet the seller's not going to negotiate with you on anything after the due diligence period has ended. So this includes your loan, includes the buyer's loan, any inspections, review of documents. Again, this is where in compliance, if your it says conditional for subdivision restrictions, HOA, it's conditional. That means if it has one, it's now required. So if it doesn't have one, that's what makes it conditional, because there's not one to have. But if there are subdivision restrictions for the property, you're required to load those into command for compliance, because you have pulled them and you have given them to provided a copy, emailed, whatever, to your buyer for them to review. So when they're asking you, hey, can we have chickens in this neighborhood? I'm going to send you the restrictive covenants and review those and see if they are. So we don't want to be the voice for. We don't want to say, well, sure, you can have chickens. The neighbor had chickens. Well, the neighbor might not be in compliance with the, with the HOA subdivision restrictions either. So just letting them review those documents. This is also including your FEMA flood map, those sorts of things. Insurance, do that early, fast and early. Have them check with their insurance provider and or Matthew Young, who so graciously provided lunch for us today, with Matthew Young Insurance. Particularly if, because we're running into a lot of issues with roofs and the age of roofs. So go ahead and have that insurance person working on that and get a quote on what the insurance is going to be. Appraisal, obviously that's ordered by the lender. A survey. Zoning, governmental regulation, governmental compliance. Is the property in compliance for what the buyer wants to use the property for? Is it in the school zone that they want to be in? All of these things need to be discovered during this due diligence period. Flood, wetland, water hazard. We talked about FEMA maps. Utilities and access. Do they have access to the utilities that we need? It was funny a long time ago when Blackberries first came out, and that was the thing. were blackberries. And, I had a client of mine and he had to be, cause he worked from home. So he had to live somewhere where he had service with his BlackBerry, cause it was a little sketchy. I know that's a long time ago, but anyway, so even things like that, like, do they have access to high-speed internet or, whatever the case may be? Checking those things, streets and roads and any special assessments. So again, we talk about, this is not a conditioned contract. We do not have a contingent contract. So it's just indicating here, sale or lease of an existing property. We're not disclosing at this point. We're just saying it's not conditional here when we're going through the buyer. It also says, big and bold, the property is being sold in its current condition. The seller is not obligated to make any repairs, improvements. They don't have to negotiate, any of that. We're just reminding the buyer, it's in the as is. We can't go into it thinking, oh, well, the seller might fix this. It's as is. If it's beyond your scope of what you're interested in, let's move on to another property. Buyer's obligation to repair damage, any damage that might occur during any inspections that the buyer has. So this would be the home inspector makes a wrong step and falls through the ceiling while he's in the attic. The buyer's responsibility to make that repair. Does not include if the inspector, when the inspector jabs a screwdriver into a rotten floor joist and more wood falls off. That's not included because that's a standard practice for a home inspector to do that. Buyer indemnifies the seller, holds them harmless, and buyer's right to terminate. So buyer has the unilateral right to terminate this contract for any reason or for no reason, by delivering to the seller a termination prior to the end of due diligence. So if due diligence ended at 5 o'clock and you sent it or received a termination at 6 o'clock, buyer no longer has that unilateral right. Time is of the essence on that 5 p.m. cutoff. Closings shall constitute acceptance of the property in its then existing condition unless provision is otherwise made in writing. This would be something like the seller, we have there's two windows that have lost their seal. We've got the windows ordered. They just aren't going to be in until after our closing date. The buyer says, we're fine with it. Let's just put something in writing that says they will be installed and hold some money in escrow with the attorney. Otherwise, I mean, I have a lot of times, I have people that have agents that I'll call and they'll be like, well, these people just moved into the house 2 weeks ago and now their well's not working. Well, they did inspections, they did, either they did or they didn't. If they didn't, shame on them. Sorry, might have been able to discover. If they did and there was not a problem, it doesn't mean there can't be a problem tomorrow, right? Because you can go out and get in your car today and your car starts fine. Tomorrow, hey, why won't my car start? Maybe your battery went dead, whatever the case may be. So there's not really a recourse after closing. if there's no other, written agreement. And typically, you know, and I get it, I mean, I have empathy for these people, but there's nothing that we can do. All we can do is advise them to contact an attorney. You know, because there are a lot of times then it becomes, well, I think they knew about this. Well, okay, now that becomes a civil case, and that's not what we do. So that would just be contacting an attorney to see what your rights are and, you know, what the best path is for you to take as well.
Can I ask you about the unilateral termination thing? You said prior to,
Yes.
all right, a buyer can still back out, they just lose their earnest money, right?
Yes,
So,
But they can't unilaterally after due diligence has ended.
so tell me what's the difference then?
Unilateral means it's my decision, I don't need your approval. So after due diligence, after we've moved from due diligence, whether there's earnest money or whether there's not earnest money, there now has to be mutual agreement on termination. So the seller has to agree as well.
That feels new. So,
No, that's always been.
I mean, if there was back in the days of release of earnest money,
Mhm. Which is still, you know, which is still there. It's on that second page because there may or may not be.
some reason
Yes,
for
yeah.
that.
And so, you know, typically, if you get, you know, you get in this situation and then at whatever reason for after due diligence, you know, something happens. You know, whether they change their mind or whether, you know, they lose their job and now they can't get the loan, whatever the case may be.
Something turns up inspection wise, even though it's the later, something,
Yes.
something breaks, something
Yeah,
happens.
yeah. That the seller's not willing to address, then, it still needs to be mutual. And in most cases, they may not agree on how the earnest money is to be, distributed. That's a whole different story. They can still mutually agree to terminate the contract. So, you know, I'm the agent and I call you and I say, Allison, my dude just lost his job. He can't get this loan. Well, Judy's the listing agent, and so, well, no, I'm sorry, I'm the buyer, you're the listing agent. My dude can't get this loan. I'm gonna send you over a mutual termination. So my buyer's gonna sign it, I'm gonna send it to you. Your seller wants to get that property back on the market. So your seller's gonna sign it as well. That's the incentive. Number one, the seller can't hold the buyer hostage to buy the property. So in order for the seller to get their property back on the market, they gotta sign that termination. They don't have to agree how earnest money is distributed. They just have to agree that they're mutually terminating the contract.
What if the seller doesn't? I mean,
Why would
your buyer decides another house came on the market,
Yep.
they're worth, and they're willing to lose what, if any, earnest money they
Yep.
put down? It's gonna be pretty hard to force them to buy the house. I mean, that
No,
would,
you can't force them to buy the house.
but
there
you're
has been
saying, but
no
the sellers
case
still have
of-
to agree to release them.
Yes. Because the seller's part of the contract as well. So the seller is not just releasing the buyer, they're releasing themselves from this contract as well. Because they can't move forward and sell the property to anybody else as long as they're bound to
Right, but-
this contract.
Potentially, can they sue for performance?
It's never been a
Never
case,
won.
never been a case one in North Carolina.
Right.
And I wouldn't take my chances with that. I mean, because because the contract also says that these are the damages that the seller is entitled to. And same thing with the buyer if there's a seller breach.
So Karen, I think it's new this year, unless I just didn't notice it. On earnest money, return of earnest money, there are two boxes. Either the earnest money will be refunded to the seller in full, or like, I think the old way used to be that it was a 50-50 split with the listing company. Is that?
That was the old way.
Yeah, I mean, nobody knew it.
Right.
I had somebody point it out to me, that, you know, somebody was released and I was really entitled to 50% of it, or we were. But now there are 2 boxes to
Mhm.
be checked,
Mhm.
right? Is that
Yep,
new?
that is new. So all of our termination forms changed. So all of our termination forms are brand new. We used to have 8, now we only have 4. And so all of our termination forms are new as of 7/25.
But what it does, I mean, I realize that now it makes it clear whether, right, this is a decision on the part of the listing agent with my seller client. Listen, if the buyer terminates with you, I'm either gonna allow you to have all of your money back, or because I did my job in securing you a buyer, right? That, I think that was the logic, then my company is entitled to 50% of that earnest money, right?
Yes.
Isn't that what that means?
Yes, and I think that that would be a situation where the seller's like, forget it, I'm just gonna pull it off the market. So I, as an agent, would not do it because that seller's gonna continue that listing with me. So eventually, I'm gonna get paid from the sale of the property, which is what I do. I don't wanna double dip. You know, I don't want to, oh, well, this one, you know, this one terminated, and so let me get 50% of this, and then I get my full compensation when it closes as well. I think it would only be a situation where, like I said, if the seller said, you know, I'm not gonna put it back on the market, or I don't wanna list with you anymore, then that's a situation where you can recoup some compensation.
Well, only if they agree, so.
Well,
Yes.
it's part of the listing agreement,
Yeah.
right? So you're saying that up front, which to me, I would say, how am I gonna know up front whether they got so ugly during the transaction that I feel like I've earned my 50% already?
Yeah.
So unfortunately, you have to state it on your listing form.
Didn't it used to be, I mean, 'cause a minute. The listing forms used to say, I wasn't a choice, as I recall, that we were entitled to 50%.
It did. It did.
And once I actually got it because somebody pointed that out, but otherwise I just all went back, even though that's what the contract
I think it's
said.
always assumed that that earnest money is gonna be refunded, right, in
Yes.
full. Or lost in full.
Lost in
Right, the buyer will lose
Will.
that earnest money in full to the seller,
Right,
and no split is ever gonna happen. I think that's the assumption, but now
they
it's
just
just
lose,
right in
it
front of
doesn't matter to them who they lose it to. They've just lost it. From the
buyer's
buyer's standpoint, from the buyer's,
from the buyer's standpoint,
but
but
from the seller's,
seller,
certainly
right.
does. So is this how clueless I'm, on the listing agreement, is there an option?
There is,
uh-huh. Yes,
yes.
And how often are you seeing people choose the 50/50?
Rarely.
Okay. Oh my God, there's some times when we have sure as hell.
Oh, no
you don't
doubt.
usually know it in the beginning.
Yeah,
Yeah, you.
yes, yeah.
Well,
no,
and
no
maybe
doubt.
because of the engagement with the buyer side, it doesn't necessarily mean you had the world's most difficult seller, which we've all had one of those. Too,
Yes.
So. Right.
Okay, so buyer representation, cash, we love it when we see that box being checked. Yes, they have the money. And then, loan. So again, not contingent upon them getting a loan. This is a, disclosure of the type of loan that the buyer intends to get. Whether it's FHA, VA, conventional, USDA, or any other amount, or any other type. So we're disclosing because that gives the seller the right to choose, they have more than one offer, or to, do I want to accept this offer? So again, not contingent, just informational.
And we love it when they change it to from conventional to FHA
Yes.
or VA.
Buyer does or does not have to, sell or lease, another property. Again, we talked about it before. We already told the buyer it's not contingent. But now this becomes and again, it says it here, does not make this contract contingent. This is just, if they are making it contingent, again, you need to go to an attorney for that. This is material fact disclosure. Whether they do or do not, because it goes to the ability to be able to fulfill the loan, and that is a material fact. So identify the property. If the property is under contract, I would strongly recommend asking for a redacted copy of the current contract. And if it's not, then is it listed? If it's not on contract, is it listed? Will it be listed? Or are they doing for sale by owner? Again, that would maybe make a difference in an offer that your seller would accept. This is where, again, they've received a signed copy or have not, or it's exempt. There's 10 different reasons why it might be exempt. I don't know all of them off the top of my head, but one of the most common that you're going to see is trust, REO, foreclosure, transfer of property from family member to family member. There's not a residential property disclosure required, and probably won't get into the others, but I can't spill them out of the file in my head right now, but I certainly have access to them if you ever have that question. And then same thing for mineral oil gas. This is where the buyer must timely pay earnest money and due diligence funds. Should they fail to, or should they deliver a check that is dishonored or bounces, then the buyer has one banking day after written notice to deliver cash, official bank check, wire transfer, electronic transfer to the payee. Form 355 is the form that you would use to demand funds. So if you've got, Rachel called me about one yesterday that she's got that's kind of throwing off some red flags. They provided a check, a personal check, and the personal check, you couldn't even read or understand the writing, so it was returned. And so now they want to write another personal check. And so I instructed her to use Form 355 for demands, because, of course, her seller's upset now, and the seller's saying, well, I can terminate the contract. Not until we send this form of demand for funds. Then if they don't perform that one banking day after you give them that notice, then yes, your seller can unilaterally terminate that contract. Buyer's responsible for all special assessments, what the buyer's costs are. This includes any of their charges by, of course, any of their loan fees, charges by an association, title insurance, title search, any fees charged by the closing attorney, recording the deed, prorated taxes, all of those sorts of things that is the responsibility of the buyer. Seller representation has owned or has not owned or does not yet own lead-based paint. Again, if it's conditional in compliance, it's conditional until it's not conditional. When it's not conditional, then it's required. If it was built prior to 1978, then it now is a required form because it's not conditional, because it is part of that. This is where we identify our associations and dues for if it's in an HOA. New thing that is so we've always had an owners association addendum. Prior to July of 25, you only used it for new construction or vacant land. That has since changed. So if you have a property that is in, which made no sense to me to start off with, if you have a property that is in an HOA, the owners association addendum is now a required form.
Wow.
Yes, because that's the form that has all the stuff on it. I mean, that's the form that says this is the benefit that you get for paying these HOA dues. You get pool, you get tennis, you get, you know,
So that form is required if there's an HOA. What
Correct.
was, okay,
Wow.
because, yeah, I did an open house for someone that, who had an HOA, there was no form. And I had guests ask me what it covered. And I
Yep.
was like,
yes. And you did an open house for an agent with Keller Williams Central? Yes.
well, it wasn't in the book, let's just put it that way. It was one. And I'm doing it again on Sunday, so I guess I'll get in touch with them.
Yes, yeah. And it's new, so, you know, I've talked about it in, so I'll talk about it again. So next week is miscellaneous forms when I do this training. And that's one of the things that we cover, so I talk about it there. I also, covered it in the team meeting yesterday and intended to cover it in the team meeting today, yet no one showed up for the team meeting. So. Well, technically Judy was here, but. Judy, this is where the fuel tanks, that's why we don't identify them previously. This is where, we identify any fuel tanks. And, just a reminder that, fuel now goes with the tank. I know y'all probably remember the day when.
Measuring fuel.
Yes, yes, and so anything that's in there goes with it. Is or is not subject to, and then you've got your seller authorization, your seller obligations, title insurance. They put a couple of these in there, authorization to disclose information, both on the buyer side and on the seller side, to make it easier for the closing attorneys. You know, because before, like, they might have sent a letter to the buyer, and they have to sign it authorizing the attorney to communicate with the lender. And so now that they've put it into the contract, it makes it easier for the attorneys, and that would also include any like title insurance. In other words, essentially the seller is saying, if you find that my title insurance policy is with investors, you're fine to call investors to see if you can do a tag-on policy. Access to property, seller shall provide reasonable access to the property through the earlier of closing or possession by buyer, including but not limited, allowing buyer and or buyer's agents or representatives an opportunity to due diligence investigations or inspections, verify satisfactory completion of negotiated repairs or improvements, and conduct final walkthroughs in the property. And to keep existing utilities fully operating at all times. So just remind your seller. Now, again, the word is reasonable. So if you've got the buyer agent calling you every single day, oh, the parents are in town, they wanna go look at the house. Oh, she wants to go measure for curtains. Oh, she wants to, you know, and it's a daily thing, that's not reasonable. So reasonably, we're gonna let you do your inspections. Reasonably, we are going to allow, if you need a contractor to come in to say, here's, you know, what are these repairs going to cost? And then, okay, now we agreed that the seller would make these repairs. We're entitled to do a walkthrough to make sure that those repairs have been satisfactorily completed and to do a final walkthrough prior to closing. Seller shall remove all of their junk. Settlement deliverables, these, I mean, this is pretty common for us. The attorney does a lien waiver, and that's what that's referring to. Or they've designated a lien agent, one or the other. Seller, will provide a general warranty deed. Sometimes you get a special warranty deed. So that just needs to be indicated if it is a special warranty versus a general warranty deed. It's not in any violations of any governmental compliances.
So it needs to be disclosed if it's special warranty.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, because the difference is that a general warranty deed goes all the way back to God. A special warranty deed only goes back to the prior owner on a title search.
Somehow in divorce, they ended up giving me a special warranty deed. I'm like, this isn't what this should be, and they never fixed it.
So now you're gonna convey it as a special warranty deed.
Thank you, attorney, who was working for me, believe it
Yeah.
or not.
Yes. Seller, pays for the, you know, seller pays for their stuff that benefits them, buyer pays for their stuff that benefits them. The deed is to be made to, this can be left blank. If the deed is being made to the name of the buyer on page 1, then you don't have to put anything there. I see people, put, it would only be, so let's say that, that I was buying a property and I wanted to put, my name and Kaylee's name on the deed, even though she's not a part of the contract, that's where I would indicate that there. You can also put as instructed to attorney. Because typically that's part of the attorney, like that's a question that they ask the buyer now is how should the deed be made out in their BIF form.
So blank means it's the same as the
As page 1.
buyer.
You got it. Yeah. Yeah. Would only be different if it were not. So for example, if Scott was buying a lot, he might put Scott Ward as the buyer, but he wants it deeded to SM Ward Construction.
So I used to see, but not lately, Judy and Jeff Weinstock married, or Judy Weinstock and Jeff married, or 2 different names. I mean, but nobody seems to require that anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna return if your paperwork, other than that, that's the way it should be.
It should be.
It should be, yes, yes. And again, it helps the attorney. You know, but I'm not gonna return paperwork, you know, if it's for something like that.
Mhm.
Just like I'm not gonna return it if you didn't put NA in every line that was NA. this is where our home warranty comes into place. Also covers, owners association, who pays what the seller pays and what the buyer pays. Prorations and adjustments, taxes, any taxes on personal property, if personal property is, so let's say that, they conveyed a boat with the property, or maybe a trailer, that you pay personal property taxes on, then that's just showing how they're gonna be prorated. They're gonna be ad valorem, just like, real property.
Any changes in the HOA, who pays what for who?
I think it changes every day. And honestly, I think
Where are we?
it changes every day, and I think it changes depending on who the management company is as well.
Okay,
Because I see some of them now where it's 50% buyer, 50% seller. That's
sometimes there's
probably,
a capitalization fee.
that's probably a conversation that I could do a 3-hour class on, and we would not know anything more at the end of it than we knew when we first started.
Okay, just wondering, because it's confusing.
Yes, yes. Here's where your addenda go. Here's your owners association disclosure. Addendum here. Can't be assigned. If it's a tax deferred exchange, contact an attorney. Execution, signed in multiple copies. And then computation of days and time, talked about that. Remedies, breach by the buyer, breach by the seller. And then, again, signature. So if it's if it's an entity or a trust, then we're putting their name there, and then they're signing their personal name. So we're putting the name of the trust or the name of the entity, and a human signs on behalf of the entity.
By name and title.
Yes, yes. And that's on both the buy side and the sell side. Make sure you complete this information. Occasionally I get one where there's nothing there, and I'm like, well, how do I know? How do I know if we're dual agents? How do I know if we're dual designated agents? You know, all of that, all of the information. And I think it's a courtesy for the other side as well to go ahead and put that information in there. Their license number, the phone number, their firm license number, the firm name, all of that's on the MLS sheet. And you can get all of that on there. So I just think it's a courtesy to do that. And then also, to make sure, are we a buyer agent, a seller sub agent, a dual agent? And if we're a dual agent, are we a designated dual agent? We have run over, and I apologize. I gotta work on my timing. It's always 7 minutes. It's always 7 minutes. So, any questions?
Well, that's what gets you is question.
Well, I know, but now that you've stayed this long, if you don't have any questions, you're free to, to log off or get up or leave or whatever the case may be. Unless you want to hear if somebody else might have a question that,
Yeah,
any questions?
questions are good.
Does this help you, Sherry, with going through your
Yes.
post licensing right now? It's just kind of worked out that she's going through her post licensing, and that's exactly what they're talking about. Where the part she's in, offers.
Oh, right, perfect.
All right, well, thank you, Zoomers, for being here. I appreciate it. I'm going to stop sharing. Oh, that's not the place to do that.
So what did we miss by not having a team meeting portion?
Yeah, hold on, yeah, let me get all of this turned off and then, hey, Mandolin, thanks for being here.